Okay, so it's goodbye IAS 1, hello IFRS 18. Why? Well, generally the rule is because IAS 1 allowed too much variation, too much choice in how the P&L looked, where you put things or not put things, and this variability makes it difficult to compare one company to the other because you're doing things in different ways. So IFRS 18 has more defined categories and subtotals, so you've got less choice, so more consistency, and therefore more comparability. So let's say hello to 5 new categories. Just like the cash flow statement, you have operating, investing and financing. Let's start with operating. Basically what the business does, so revenue, cost of sales, selling and distribution expenses, any impairment losses as well, as long as they're on operating assets. Then investing, well, the money you get from things outside of your normal resources, so income from associates, dividends and interest received, rental income from investment properties. And finally, financing, interest paid on loans, on bonds, lease liabilities, that sort of thing. So there's 3 categories. Obviously I said 5, so there must be 2 more. Operating, investing and financing, and 2 extra, income tax, which obviously tax goes into it, discontinued operations if you've had one during the year. And I just want to know what the profit or loss was from that operation net of tax. Okay, so there are your 5 new categories. So what we're saying is, if you know something is an operating expense, it must go at the top of your P&L. If you know something is a discontinued operation, it must go in the discontinued operations bit at the bottom of your P&L. Now to help us with that, there's 2 mandatory subtotals. There's more subtotals, but 2 are mandatory. So you've done everything. You think, right, I've got all my operating expenses. I know I have to put them at the top of my P&L. So now I know that my subtotal must be operating profit. There's no choice. If it was an operating expense or income, it should have gone to operating at the top of my P&L. So the mandatory subtotal makes sense, operating profit or loss. Then what was my next heading? Can you remember after operating? My next category? It was investing, wasn't it? So you think, right, if I've got any investing expenses or income probably, then you think, well, I'll put that below operating profit then, don't I? So any investing activities such as share of profit of associates, dividend income, rental income goes to that line there below operating profit. And then you can have the second mandatory IFRS subtotal, which is a bit of a mouthful. But what I want you to think of it as what comes after it. So this is profit before, not before operating, it's after operating. Not before investing, it's after investing. It's before financing and income tax. Okay, I don't know why they didn't include discontinued operations, maybe because not every company has one. So that's a mandatory subtotal as well. So there are your 2 mandatory subtotals. After that then, as we said, you get finance costs. Then you'd have profit before income tax, that's not mandatory. Then you have an income tax category, profit from continued operations, that's not mandatory, but it just splits it out nicely, doesn't it, to leave you for profit for the year. So 2 mandatory ones and then some suggested ones really. Okay, so it's a lot more structured, isn't it, and a lot simpler. It takes a lot of the guesswork out of things. I quite like it. Now it also says, look, your expenses, your operating expenses could be by their very nature, by what they are. You could list them as raw materials, wages, depreciation. Or you could do as what most people do, list them as what is their function, cost of sales, distribution costs, admin expenses, etc. Now, you must choose the one that gives the most useful, relevant summary of the operating expenses. So choose the one that's best used to users. Now, you can have a mixed presentation line where some expenses are by function and certain items are shown by nature, if that provides clarity only, okay? But generally you keep them separate. SFP hasn't changed much. You've still got the 12-month split, current and non-current. That wasn't rethought in IFRS 18. One big change though is certain lines have to be presented separately, goodwill being one of those. So goodwill must now be shown as a distinct item because it's unique and generally users want to know it. Then you've got other minimum lines, PPE, investment property, IA, financial assets, etc. And I'll talk about them in a second. But basically, you're just making sure that the key categories of assets, liabilities and equity aren't mixed up at all. They're separated out to the minimum of PPE, investment property, etc. Now, it's all about this, aggregation and disaggregation. So if items are dissimilar, well, they shouldn't be in the same line. So an investment property wouldn't be in PPE because it's a different beast, isn't it? You're keeping it for different reasons, so they are dissimilar. Cash equivalence is not the same line as PPE because it's different liquidities. So significant lines presented separately don't get hidden as well in other assets. Bring them out as a minimum separately. But what you can aggregate together and should aggregate together is very small similar items to avoid clutter, to avoid too much noise, to make things as understandable as possible. So items get grouped together only if they share similar characteristics. So line items in the primary statements, P&L, SFP, etc. should comprise of items that have at least one characteristic in common. So every trade receivable has similar liquidity characteristics, isn't it? They're all going to be paid within 90 days, for example, or should be. And then when items are not similar, or when they're individually material, then you separate them, you disaggregate them, you don't leave them in there. So you separate significant and individual items, individually material items. And you either show them separately or you disclose them separately. So as you're going through the P&L, you're saying to yourself and the SFP, do these items share a characteristic that combining them would be logical? If not, split them out. And remember, we split out things that are individually material or they're significantly not similar. Okay, so we make sure we don't obscure material information by bringing it out. The note should provide the disaggregated details where needed if you're not doing it on the face. And IFRS 18 even goes as far as to say, look, don't use other assets, other income. Try and label or break it down as much as possible. MDPMs, Management Defined Performance Measures, used to be called alternative performance measures, used to be called non-GAAP or non-IFRS. And they'd basically be things you'd hear directors talking about in communications, like they'd talk about their underlying profits, and you'd be like, whoa, what? That's not on my income statement. So any management defined performance measures that are not specified by IFRSs but are used in public communication, like core profit, underlying profit, EBITDA, earnings before interest, tax, depreciation, amortization, they must be explained and reconciled to its nearest IFRS equivalent. So by doing so, you're saying to the managers, you're saying, look, you're not going to get away with loose terminology. If you're using that terminology and it's not in the IFRSs, then you must explain it and you must reconcile it to something we all understand. So it increases transparency and discipline for the directors. Really good stuff. So what sort of things should they disclose? If they're saying underlying profit, well, describe the measure. Tell me why you think that portrays performance. Why are you mentioning that? Clear definition of how you calculated it and a reconciliation to its most comparable IFRS. Also, the effects of income tax and NCI on it. Okay, so all good stuff really, isn't it? All kind of makes sense. Cash flow statements, the indirect method now will always start with operating profit. Remember, that's the mandatory line. Everyone will have it, so they'll all start off with the same figure, which kind of makes sense. All aligns. Interest and dividends, there's no more choice now. If you remember, interest paid could end up in operating, could end up in financing, could sometimes end up in investing. Now it's always financing, the outflows. Interest received and dividends received are always inflows, always have investing activities. Okay, so again, cutting out the nonsense, cutting out the fluff, making it comparable. So operating profit, we know is the start of the cash flow. Interest paid, financing cash flow. Interest received, investing cash flow. Dividend paid, financing cash flow. Dividend received, investing cash flow. It all makes sense. Offsetting, the idea you've got an asset of 80 and a liability of 60, should we offset it and call an asset of 20? IFRS 18 says no, we shouldn't. No offsetting assets and liabilities, or even income and expenses, unless an IFRS specifically requires or permits it. One such example would be deferred tax. So if you think about it, if you've got deferred tax of 100 assets and liability of 80, no, put it the other way around, more likely. Deferred tax liability of 100 and a deferred tax asset of 80, then you've got a net 20 liability, if I said that the right way around, but you know what I mean anyway. A liability of 20, and that liability you'll just pay over to the taxman, won't you? So those two you are allowed to net off as long as it's paid to the same tax authority, because if you think about it, that's literally what you're going to do. But the general rule is you don't offset, because we want to know, if it was 100 assets and 80 liabilities, we don't want to know the net 20. I want to know the 100 assets and the 80 liabilities. Set for deferred tax, also a little bit of IFRS 9 as well. So that was IFRS 18, a quick overview of it. Hope it helped, hope you find it useful, and even more so, I hope to see you at aCOWtancy.com really soon.